حمود 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 حبيبي حمود حمود حبيبي حمود حبيبي حمود حمود حبيبي حمود حمود قوم اقعد من النوم قوم اقعد من النوم قوم اقعد من النوم يا احمد حمادي يا احمد حمادي حمود 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 حبيبي حمود حمود حبيبي حمود حبيبي حمود حمود حبيبي حمود حمود قوم اقعد من النوم قوم اقعد من النوم قوم اقعد من النوم يا احمد.
The crisis in the Middle East during the Cold War started in 1955, and its effects can still be seen today in many relationships the United States and other nations have with the Middle East today. This entire crisis started with Egypt, Britain, and the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal crisis was the invasion of Egypt by Israel, the UK, and France in 1956. They wanted to regain control of the Suez Canal and remove the Egyptian president Abdel Nasser. The fighting stopped when political pressure from the US and USSR began and the three invaders withdrew. The United Kingdom and France were humiliated, and President Nasser of Egypt was strengthened.
After the withdrawal of the UK and France, the US became very involved with Saudi Arabia, Iran, and their oil. These states bought large quantities of arms from the US and other countries who were not rich in oil, like Turkey, Egypt, and Israel, became large recipients of US aid, mostly military.
As the Middle East traded more oil with the US, and the US gave more arms and supplies to the Middle East started to westernize. All the people started to adapt and adopt American traditions and customs. Like the way they dress, the cars they drive, and the food they eat. During this period of time, Iran shied away from more of its religious rulings, such as Sharia law and all that, and they started to be a lot more free, like America. They started to promote women in the same roles as men, such as women driving, women going out and drinking and partying, and just an overall freeness in the way they represented women and the way women represented themselves. This is not seen today, as Sharia law has almost taken over the entire nation of Iran. But this period of westernization didn't last too long, as the current leader of Iran at the time left for 2 months without notice, and a man by the name of
Ayatollah Khomeini
came along with ideals that pushed a more religion-driven Iran, with a lot more Sharia law all over the place. And he started protests all over Iran, holding up signs that said "Death to America," all that, and burning American flags, and this complete rejection of American ideals and customs. And this revolution actually ended in favor of Ayatollah Khomeini. And it ended with the usurping of the current leader of the time, giving a more religious set of ideals and culture to the state of Iran.
War between Iran and Saudi Arabia broke, and Saudi Arabia was backed by the USA and their military and weapons, and Iran was backed by Iraq and their leader Saddam Hussein.
This forced the United States to intervene even more than they already had at that point. The U.S. sent troops and weapons to different oil deposits all around the Middle East in order to secure it from other places taking it. This fear was led mostly by the thought that the USSR and communists would come for the oil, and the US would stop at nothing to protect it. So they ended up sending many troops around those places.
The hostage crisis began November 4th, 1979, when an Iranian militant group captured the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. Then, Ayatollah Khomeini, Iran's political and religious leader, agreed to let all non-Americans go and were left with 52 They were left with 52 captives. The hostages were there for 6 months when President Nixon launched a military mission to free the 52 hostages. The mission was a failure and 8 U.S. servicemen were left dead. On the day of President Ronald Reagan's inauguration, the U.S. freed $8 million worth of frozen Iranian assets, and 52 men and women were let free after 444 days in captivity.
In the modern day, the USA's relationship with the Middle East has only gotten worse, with major events such as 9/11 and terrorist groups such as ISIS terrorizing not only the USA, but many other countries around the world. It seems like there is no end to this problem. The USA still tries to get oil and has many troops deployed all over the Middle East. And it seems like the battle for oil and the battle in the Middle East with the USA has no end in sight.
The facts. Let's go back to 1951. Iran's first elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh saw that the wealth needed to develop Iran was leaving the country in the form of oil. He decided to take it back. For 50 years, oil reserves had been under the control of the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, the predecessor to BP, a UK company. Mossadegh became hugely popular in Iran for nationalizing Iranian oil production, exerting control of this precious resource and keeping oil money in Iran. But this made Mossadegh wildly unpopular with the American and British governments. The United States also took notice of Mossadegh's nationalism and feared he was veering too close to communism. So the newly formed CIA engineered a coup called Operation Ajax, ousting Mossadegh and reinstalling Mohammad Reza Pahlavi as Shah. And to no one's surprise, the Shah saw to it that oil was once again regulated through the West. For the next 20 years, the Shah's position of power was guaranteed by the US, and the US received Iranian oil at a favorable price. The Shah spurred modern economic development through the White Revolution, which promoted progressive political changes, including allowing women the right to vote. But it came at a price: autocratic rule and corruption. He created a huge economic gap, forcibly tried to rid the country of Islam, and employed a secret police trained by the US military, called the Savak, to torture, execute, and stifle dissent. His secret police were so brutal that Amnesty International named them one of the world's worst violators of human rights. The Shah crushed all political opposition by using troops to massacre demonstrators and by killing or exiling their leaders. Finally, in 1978, Iranians took to the streets, forcing the Shah out of power. Fearing for his life, the Shah fled and eventually landed in the United States. After spending 14 years in exile for opposing the Shah's regime, Shah critic and Islamic fundamentalist Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini returned and proclaimed Iran to be the Islamic Republic of Iran. Khomeini brought various religious clerics to power and new religious laws were enforced. Women and men had to wear certain clothing. Alcoholic drinks, Western movies, and men and women swimming together were all banned. Music and television were also heavily regulated. Iran demanded the Shah be returned to stand trial for his crimes. And on November 4th, 1979, when the US declined the request, a group of Iranian college students took over the US embassy in Tehran. As a result, 52 American citizens were held hostage for a total of 444 days, the longest hostage crisis in recorded history. One failed military rescue ordered by Jimmy Carter resulted in the deaths of 8 American servicemen and 1 Iranian civilian. The hostages were formally released back to the US just minutes after newly elected President Ronald Reagan was sworn into office. Hoping to take advantage of the revolutionary chaos, Iraq invaded Iran in 1980. The United States sided with Iraq, and throughout the 8-year war, America supplied President of Iraq, Saddam Hussein, with intelligence reports, billions of dollars, military technology, and chemical weapons. Pretty much leading to years of back and forth open conflict and numerous proxy wars between the United States and Iran, including but not limited to the Iran-Contra scandal, the anti-communist purge, Iranian Air Flight 655, the Syrian civil war, the Yemeni crisis, Darfur, tariffs, sanctions, naval disputes, covert actions, detained diplomats, detentions of hikers, drone incidents, threats to close the Persian Gulf, frozen assets, as well as the threat of nuclearization by Iran. After years of back-channel talks, President Obama and 6 other parties, China, France, Russia, United Kingdom, Germany, and the European Union, signed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, also known as the Iran Nuclear Deal, in which Iran would discontinue a weaponized nuclear program in exchange for a rollback of economic sanctions, opening a new chapter in the relationship between the US and Iran. Which brings us to today.
The United States will withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal.
A move the Iranian government has condemned, causing relations between the two countries to go from poor to worse.
Many people I talked to in Iran were anxious about what the sanctions would mean for their livelihoods, for their access to essential goods, and more generally, what they will mean for Iran's place in the world and its fraught relations with the West.
It's just the latest blow in a fight that has been going on for decades.
Don't make no sense.
What you doing with that?